street singing doo-la-ding, ding, ding, ding. Her looks fine, she looks fine, she looks fine, she looks fine. I mean, are you a bit cold, are you? Singing ding-a-ding, ding, ding, ding. I
think I must be cold because I can feel my left nipple rubbing against my arm.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? Sorry, I missed you guys the last few days. As you know, my dad isn't well. He's feeling a bit better, but he hasn't been well, and I had to go to the hospital with him yesterday. And you know what hospitals are like. You're there all day when you're there. But they were lovely. Everybody there was lovely. Shout out to King's College Hospital. You were a lovely lot, and thank you so much for being so kind to my dad and to me.
There you go. There you go.
It was odd though, because there was a number of times when I bumped into nurses and different people, and they said, "Oh, can we do a selfie?" And I'm like, "Yeah," with my mask on, and they're like, "Can you take your mask down?" So I'm like, "Shit."
Oh, look, there's us frozen.
Shit, I'm in a hospital and I've got a nurse asking me.
Yeah, it's always a tricky one, that, because I guess if that photo pops up somewhere, someone will be able to go, "No, look, see, not observing,
Yeah.
God, it's so, I just hate people going.
At one point, my dad was really tearful, and I got up and I just put my arms around him. But we were drinking a coffee at the same time because we were in the Costa Coffee in the hospital. And so I didn't have my mask on, but I came around behind him and just hugged him like that because he was crying, you know. And I felt somebody take a photo of me.
Oh.
Can you believe that? In a hospital, when your 87-year-old dad's feeling tearful. Oh,
that is a bit frustrating when that happens. NADIA doesn't actually spot that a lot, but that does happen quite a bit. It's weird.
What?
When in a moment where some sort of degree of privacy should be sort of, respected, photos are being taken of you. It's weird. Tamara Day is in Tel Aviv wishing peace. Tamara Day. Well,
oh God, so do we.
It's such a complex subject, this, but it's one that I think deserves some kind of comment. Obviously, Nadia's family is an Arabic family. Obviously, Israel is a country that finds itself with quite a few other countries surrounding it that want to deny its own existence. And I think before we get sort of talking about this, we have to make it absolutely clear that the state of Israel is entitled to exist. We entirely understand that. We entirely agree with that. We entirely believe that. But there are enormous buts here. There is a situation developing, I think, in the Palestinian situation and the Gaza Strip situation, and obviously Hamas is a terrorist organization, and we recognize that too. But there is a situation here where even many liberal-minded, and I don't know where you are on this tomorrow, because I know that, rockets are being fired, but an incomparable balance of power, military power, exists between Palestine and Israel. So I always find it very hard to equate like with like. But we have a situation where a lot of people in Israel, there are hundreds of thousands of people in Israel who are frustrated with the Israeli state's treatment of the Arabs in Palestine. The way I situate Hamas is I don't sanction their behavior and I don't sanction their illegality or their terrorism. But what you have to do on the international stage, like the British government did in Ireland, you have to understand where that expression of fury is coming from. And if you choose to ignore it, it will forever be there. And I would go one step further, that there are many political reasons for those in power in Israel for there to be a conflict, because it suits the government's sort of narrative. And in many ways, it suits them to have Hamas as an enemy. And so I think there's a lot of what I call fanning of flames. There's a lot of complex diplomatic decisions that are made that create, in my opinion, a tinderbox situation that is now blowing up. And so I reiterate, I've heard so many impassioned Israeli Jewish citizens hugely disappointed with their government's systematic treatment of the Arabs in Palestine, the Arabs in Israel over the years. And this crisis has taken a particularly nasty turn this morning, in that for the first time since 1966, the Israeli government has had to issue emergency orders to deal with an Arab population in Israel that's rioting in Israel. So this is that's a very different situation. I think you can have one of two approaches to it. You either see both sides as irrational and ridiculous, or you try to seek some understanding of where both sides are at. And you have to almost, just like Blair did very successfully with the Northern Irish question, temporarily you have to disarm this idea that
Exactly, Brenda.
there's an illegality and terrorism that's the only expression that's coming out of Gaza. It's not the only expression. It's a part of it, and it's a regrettable part of it, but it's felt like by many Palestinians, it's the only way they can make the world stand up and take notice. That's what I feel about it. So, as I say that,
I think, a lot of people are saying here they genuinely don't understand what's going on. It's because it's so complex. It's so complex, but there are things going on that the world should know about. And I would say there's a lot of very good stuff going around online at the moment. Not fake stuff. You can see it's absolutely real. And just take a look at actually what is going on.
Yeah. And I think it's really important. And I think the Israeli government, I'm talking about the Israeli government, I'm not talking about the Israeli people. The Israeli government would get so much more purchase with a lot of other governments and Arab nations if they were seen to be being realistic about the circumstances that they find themselves in. So, for example, apartheid in South Africa. The whole world was anti-apartheid. The ANC was an illegal terrorist organisation, according to the white South Africans. To the black South Africans, the ANC was a freedom-fighting force. Now, that doesn't sanction the killing of anyone. It doesn't sanction it. You've got to explain it and you've got to understand it. And I get really worried that in any discussion about the Israeli-Palestinian problem, if you seek to explain, not justify, explain what's going on in Palestine, you become called anti-Semitic and all this. It's just not the case. Now, obviously, some people do that and some people weaponize it. But it's really key in every conversation to start by saying this is not anti-Jewish or anti-Israel. This is about anti-Israeli policy in Palestine.
Yeah.
And unless they change it, this is forever going to happen. But I would go so far as to say this. I think the Israeli government has a vested interest in these little explosions happening.
They do.
They want these things to keep happening because they can keep holding the Palestinian problem as a problem. As long as one rocket is fired from Palestine, which is highly ineffective and probably flies off in the opposite direction, that's not to say people haven't been killed, but it's not the same as fighter jets going in and knocking down buildings and tower blocks and destroying infrastructure. It just isn't. But so long as one rocket fizzles out of Palestine,
to move into people's
there's a
homes,
justification.
to move into people's homes, aggressively move into people's homes,
and
move them out.
The international community
Take over their
has
sheets,
to,
their plates,
absolutely.
their cups, and just move in,
Absolutely.
just to cuckoo into another person's
Yeah.
home. What kind of rage is that going to? When people when people are put under sudden impossible curfews. So crops are allowed to die. And, this has been going on for a long, long time. And this is the moment where people can really see and action can be taken. Somebody just said, and I think it's a really good point. They said, I'm really sick of people on social media belittling people that aren't posting about it. I really want to know more about it. And I think that's such an important point.
Yeah,
because,
I agree.
Because to just post, to not post doesn't mean you don't care. I mean, there are so many things going on across the world, so many atrocities. And Lee is really good on this as well. For me, this is very close. I have members of my family that are Palestinian. Obviously, my father is Arab. I think the world is actually still... There is a great sanctioning to be racist against Arabs in the way that it wouldn't be tolerated.
Islamophobia, okay.
See, my dad's not Muslim, but my dad's one of the very rare Christian Arabs. But aside from Islamophobia, there is a certain allowance of racism towards Arabs that would not be tolerated in any other way. And I'm very, very, and I care passionately about all of this, but I don't blare it out on social media because you have to be so cautious. Yeah. Because what can happen is you can say something on social media and then there is a demand for you then to behave in a certain way, and then you've got... So I tread this really difficult line. Like here, I'm really happy to talk about it, and with Mark that's so educated also on the actual politics of it, because I'm not so, and mine is like heart and impulse and up and very personal, and it's very important that you actually know what you're talking about and able to put it across properly. And if I just post a little story now going, wow, isn't it just awful, then actually does that make me, who am I trying to look to that I care about? But I am thinking about what I'm doing. I am thinking about what kind of fundraising. I think we're going to talk about that. What kind of fundraising we do. And you want to take proper action. Don't feel bullied into always commenting on everything that goes on and being accused of not caring, because social media isn't the barometer of how we care as humans. You know, so
It's really, it's such a hot potato. And I think what the Israeli government have done, which is very dangerous, is they've weaponized any ability to be critical of their policy in Palestine.
you have to be able to be critical of everything and discuss it.
And it's not only sort of, look, international organizations like the United Nations and various sort of charitable organizations and other governments around the world recognize that what they're doing is essentially a form of apartheid. Check out the short film, The Present, which gives you an incredibly ordinary assessment of what an Arab father has to go through to buy a present for his wife in the Gaza Strip.
Living with all the restrictions of the Gaza Strip. You know, find out about the Gaza Strip. You will be fascinated. Undefined Reb, I just want to say this. Agreed, Nadia. As a half Arab myself, I've experienced such a rise in racist abuse in recent years, and people seem to have no idea. It's not qualified. You can't say it's racism if you're an Arab.
Yeah, it's weird.
Really
Can
weird.
I just say, Sean Thomas, I've got your name, Sean. We'll sing you happy birthday towards the end. It's just a bit of an sort of intense sort of political conversation now to suddenly leap into birthday singing. And I think it's really important what Nadia's just saying there. We all recognise that things like this, anti-Semitic policy from any of the governments or organisations in the Middle East are abhorrent. It has to be said from the outset, are abhorrent. But there's an enormous but here. I noticed images of mosques being raided and stun-gunned and tear-gassed by the Israeli police. Churches full of women praying. If that were to happen in a synagogue, vice versa, there would rightly be total outrage. But it seems to be that there is a disjunction between what's permissible in Jerusalem and in Israel and in Palestine versus what happens to the actual. So Islamophobia is weird. Does get it's not allowed.
It's really weird. It's not a discussion.
And I can't work out whether, unfortunately, because it's got confused by the ISIS thing, it's just seen as something that's a bit, no.
Anne-Marie says, Mark, why do you think the West is so reluctant to call Israel out?
The West is so reluctant to call out Israel because Israel has a huge relationship with the rest of the world. I think, Israeli government is plugged into the higher echelons of many, many, many governments in the West. And so there is a huge... I hate to say it. I think a huge part of it is around arms dealing. I think a huge part of it is around strategy. They're a strategically important nation in the Middle East for the West to maintain a really meaningful dialogue with and hold with. The other most important reason they're also connected to many other countries in the West is they do have a democracy. I mean, mustn't forget, there are many Israeli Arabs. The Israeli Arab Party is the third largest party. Lodz, I can never pronounce it correct, spelled L-O-D, is it Lodz or Lod? Is the city where the Israeli Arabs, and Israeli Arabs are rioting insanely at the moment. It's where they've had to issue all sorts of emergency orders. And so, it's a democracy. It is a democracy, but even within a democracy, its governmental policy towards the Palestinians, sadly, the Palestinians themselves outside of Israel don't benefit from that democracy. So do you know what I mean? And I think so to that extent, I think there's a lot to be said for what Israel can be at its best. And I think that's why the West has that connection with it, because actually it could be this beacon, and in many ways it is this beacon of democratic rule and responsibility. And then I just feel on policy, they fall flat on their face when it comes to how they deal with the Palestinians. And I think we all agree Hamas' tactics are wrong, but I will go back to it. we would not have, and I know peace in Northern Ireland is a relative term. I mean, I know it's kicking off again now. We would not have got the Good Friday Agreement, and I should know, I had a relative who was involved in the actual peace process. He said, if we had not sat opposite the IRA, we would not have got there.
Yeah.
If we had not unweaponized our constant rhetoric about everything they did was awful, if we'd not sat down and said, okay,
Where would we
have
be?
to
Where
push
would we have
past
ended
this.
up?
And this was one of the most senior, he was heralded by the government, relative of mine, who was involved with Tony Blair in sorting that. We have proof. So they have to talk. You can't just say Hamas is a terrorist thing, it's da-da-da-da. Yes,
talk.
you have to talk. You have to talk. You have to talk.
I love you.
No, but it frustrates me.
Everyone's saying Mark for Prime Minister.
No, but it frustrates me because, and I think we've I've had to be really careful there because I don't want there to be even an inch where you can say that there's anything, to question the right of Israel to exist.
It's such a terrible thing.
What's this?
No COVID
Israel not
vaccines for
letting
the
Palestinian people
Palestinians.
have COVID jabs. I mean, there are so many examples of essentially apartheid behaviour. It's just infuriating and it's frustrating. And the reason it matters to talk about it today is that unless all of those things are talked about, sometimes just acknowledging your behaviour has been bad will make the other side diminish in their hostility. If you were to say to the Palestinians, look, do you know what? Perhaps this has been too stringent. Why don't we cooperate?
Yeah.
Why don't we cooperate? You've got, Palestinians can't fish on their own coastline. They can't go into their own sea to fish. It's a strip on the coast, but they can't even use it. It's crazy. And then
We're going to do a fundraiser.
And that's the irony. And I think there are some really
positive.
bad eggs in the Israeli government who know that this is actually the case, know that this is actually terrible and morally not correct. But it allows them to keep sort of saying that if anyone criticises us for this, they're anti-Semitic. It's just not the case.
Undefined reb. Hurt people.
Exactly.
You have to understand, not necessarily justify.
Yeah, exactly. Hamas is killing civilians, and that's absolutely reprehensible. And the Israeli government is killing civilians, and that's absolutely reprehensible. It's like for like. We can't keep pointing at Hamas. Hamas is a consequence.
How long has this gone on without, unless there are some proper dialogue? Is this just going to go on forever?
No.
I mean, think of the individuals. Think of the individual peaceful people that are just trying to get on with their lives on both sides. On both sides. Years ago, I did a play where I played a Palestinian freedom fighter, and it was actually written by an Israeli Jew, the play. And she wrote it because her son had to go into the army as an Israeli, and he didn't want to. He was a peaceful boy, and it completely messed up his life. He didn't want to be in the army. He didn't want to be doing what he did. On both sides, there are people that just want bloody peace. And you can't, with this injustice going on. I mean, God, where is this going to end this time?
Michelle, hi Michelle.
When people have no hope,
Yeah.
and there's no hope, and now there's not even COVID vaccines for the Palestinians. That's a whole other pile of mess, isn't it?
Michelle, I saw you posting something the other day from one of your friends in Israel. I have friends on both sides, and I find really sad is that they are totally united in their response to what's happening. It would be incredibly powerful if the media focused on them more.
Like my dad says, they
Absolutely.
always lived in harmony.
Yeah.
For eons. And there are people on both sides that want to come together and change this. There's no side is just evil. There are a lot of innocent, good people wanting to just live their bloody lives, have their children, go to worship wherever they worship, be able to fish and grow their crops, and these are just
And
basic
not have their
humanity.
homes not be resettled.
Imagine being sanctioned for people to just walk into, come in, take over your house. And this has been going on. That is going to cause rage. Imagine the young child that is thrown out of their house when that happens. It's from a very young age, people are leaving with a very angry heart on both sides, and that's not good.
And you
for
can't.
anyone.
It's almost. It gets. I mean, I think this might be what you're saying, Zoe, about Northern Ireland. It's a sort of myth that it's solved. I think you're right. it goes into the DNA, and it goes into the DNA because, in a sense, it's like we've talked about this before. It's the trauma. It's inherited trauma on both sides. Emma McDonald, really important point here. As a Jewish woman, and at the moment dealing with some local anti-Semitic behaviour, I'm so sorry. Israel for me should always be the shield, not the sword. That gives me goosebumps.
That's beautiful.
That gives me absolute.
Makes you want to cry.
It's giving me goosebumps. When we read about this, we've been frustrated about this for years. We see the anti-Semitic behaviour that comes from it. It allows anti-Semitism to breed. It allows Islamophobia to breed. Both sides lose out in this. And to describe Israel as trying to be the shield, not the sword, that goes back to just quickly why I think the West, in its best interests, has a connection with Israel, is because I think at its best, that's what it can be. Yeah, sorry. I think that's that sort of ends the subject.
The problem is, of course, there's lots of distraction going in here. In Israel, the Prime Minister is in a terrible mess.
Yeah.
He's in a terrible mess, personally. I mean, this is suiting him just great at the moment. So, innocent people, I think, are being used by powerful people for the powerful people to keep their little lives exactly how they want them. So.
I'm going to give Blair a call and say, look, mate, I think you're trotting around these countries not doing very much. Do you remember he had the Middle East? Didn't he have some sort of Middle East solving thing? But now his hair's gone all long. Mind you, mine is a bit long too. But anyway, I mean, it's just all our hearts are going out to both sides of this conflict.
And the terrible suffering.
Yeah. I'm literally going to go and get another coffee because I've spoken myself hoarse.
You go and have a coffee. I've just made you a massive green juice. You are not putting a coffee on top of that green juice.
You're going to tell us about Fred West.
You are not having. So I've just made him a green juice.
It was delicious.
A whole thing of celery, a whole cucumber, a whole bag of spinach. Right. If you put coffee on it, you're not going to absorb those vitamins. But you're going to put it on top of the juice. Just let your body take in those vitamins, for God's sake.
So this is the story which actually broke yesterday around the Fred West story. Can I just take a moment? Can we just pause? Because you were very, very impassioned about this. And I kind of saw this story yesterday. I don't know why. It didn't sort of feel right to talk about it with Teddy.
Holdsworth, no, Mark, don't do it.
Don't.
Maybe we just need a moment in between before we move on to the story. I'm just thinking. Oh, there was a birthday. Let's do a birthday.
Sean Thomas. Let's sing Sean Thomas happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sean Thomas. Happy birthday to you.
Sean, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
What's that? Did anyone watch Three Families on BBC? Very, very powerful drama. Catch it on iPlayer. Oh, we'll write it down. Thanks, Faith.
We were, as a family, we are smitten with Mayor of Easttown. It's just
Smitten. Also, on Friday, there's a new drama with Catherine Kelly.
I'm talking about the Underground.
ITV drama.
Oh, no.
No, sometimes ITV dramas are good.
But Underground Railroad is like the most important series ever to land for race relations and the history of the slave trade in America. It's like
when's that?
Friday.
It's
the biggest. They're talking about it as being the biggest. But I mean, I think that's going to be sort of streamable. So what is it? Who's Catherine Jenkins?
Catherine Kelly. She's really good. She was brilliant. People know her best, I suppose, for Corrie, but she's a brilliant actress.
Oh, is she?
Yeah,
okay.
Really,
what's the series? It's called Innocent. Christine What's that saying?
Yeah. Is it all about whether she's murdered somebody or not? It's a kind of thing good. Our subs love.
Oh, I want to watch that. Innocent. Is she the murderess? Fantastic. Watch this is our series on. Oh, and did anyone see Inside Number 9? The series, that new comedy started, didn't it? Or it's starting this week. Maybe it's on tonight. I can't remember. What's that sound?
Yeah, and don't forget to watch Davina tonight, 9 o'clock, Channel 4, Sex, Myths and Menopause. We are going to be doing a chat, not a review. We're going to be doing a chat with you guys afterwards. So anybody wants to join us afterwards, we'll be here at whatever time it finishes, 5 minutes after whatever time it finishes. And I'm also going to be doing lives on Instagram in the breaks. So join me in the breaks as well. Love Mayor of Easttown says, and Amelia Walsh. Yeah, it's so good, isn't it? So good. Yeah, the documentary tonight, I'm really hopeful. I was talking to Dr. Louise Newson, who's also a contributor of it and the one that I talk about all the time. And she said she's watched it, and she goes, honestly, not just because I'm in it. She goes, it is so good. It's so good. Oh, Tony Blair's had his hair cut off. He was on GMB this morning, says Jackie Vellino.
Oh, good.
Panic off, everybody. We were all
good.
very worried about his hair.
I was getting very worried.
Right, so Claire, thank you everybody asking about Teddy. Thank you so much. I spent the day in hospital with him yesterday, had various tests, because you know he's had a number of these mini strokes over the last couple of weeks. So we've been really worried about him. He's been very emotional. It's been, it's been a weird couple of weeks. But yesterday we had some good news because he had a scan on this carotid artery, which they were worried was really furred. Now, I could tell that the guy was really surprised that it hadn't got worse. Yeah, but my dad really looks after himself. And my sister, who cooks all their meals for them, put him on a vegan diet about 4 months ago, which is brilliant for plaque in the arteries. So they think that that might be why he's...
That's amazing news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Yeah.
So, So we're just keeping our fingers crossed for him, really.
Yeah.
So let's move on to this horrific story. First and foremost,
Well, you know
Mary
it in more detail, but
Bast Holmes family.
Yeah.
Oh my God, because
both the parents are dead, right?
both her parents are dead. So Mary Bast Home went missing in 1968.
I didn't realise Fred West was killing that far back.
Yeah,
It's weird. I for some reason I always, because maybe he was caught because of when he was caught. Claire Hamer, they're gorgeous. Thank you so much. I just didn't realise they went that far back. Don't know why.
Tragic story. So she'd left the cafe where she worked. It was a snowy night. She was waiting at the bus stop, and they believe that she was snatched at the bus stop. Now, the way he had worked, actually a month before he took her, he'd put a concrete floor into the cafe. So he will have known her because she worked there. But they think that there might have been a struggle to get her into the car because this bit breaks my heart. Sorry.
It's all right.
It's just so sweet that she was waiting at the bus stop to go and see her boyfriend, and she had a Monopoly under her arm.
Oh, dang.
And they found pieces of Monopoly in the snow, which suggests that it was a struggle because she dropped a Monopoly box. Anyway, so she disappeared. Nobody knew where she was, obviously. She, obviously Fred West was suspected of her disappearance. And I was listening to Rose West's lawyer today on the Sky, and he was saying that he was actually questioned about Mary, but he thinks that they just missed it, the police, they just missed it. He did apparently admit to murdering her later on in prison to his son.
Right.
And had said that he was keeping back the details of her murder so that he could use it as a bargaining tool for privileges in the hospital.
I find that almost more chilling than anything else that he was thinking in those terms.
But he was a sociopath, wasn't he? So he had no feelings at all. He was also a fantasist. So he was very difficult to interview because sometimes he wasn't actually lying. He was just in his fantasy. And her poor parents, Mary's parents, died before they actually knew and had any closure. Now, apparently, the family had begged Gloucester Police to dig up the cafe where this week a documentary crew, and we don't know what the programme is, but there are rumours that it's a Trevor McDonald programme. The dog with the camera crew sniffed something suspicious or something was alerted him, and then they used some camera imaging, and there was a shape under there. So the police are now in there, and they say it's going to take...
as Dawney Harvey says, if it's been rumoured since then that remains there, why on earth have they not taken up the effing flooring? I totally agree.
So apparently they did at the time do some cursory searching at the floor. But, and I was all really angry with the police, and I was thinking, why didn't they do it, and da-da-da. Now, I was listening to Fred West admitted to 30 murders. He was actually only charged for 12, and he was admitted to 30. So if you think 30, There's probably so many
Why aren't
more
they
than
searching
that.
for 18
No, but
people
listen,
then?
I listened to the lawyer today. He said the Gloucestershire Constabulary were under such pressure with no extra money. They had no money. So if you think about it, it's very easy for us to go, which we were this morning. Why didn't they just dig that up? But they were just scattered all over the place. There was so much going on at horrific time. Yeah, just absolutely just heartbreaking. And the family have asked today for like privacy. It will be I mean, imagine for them today hearing that. Imagine.
So
Just
this is an
awful.
ongoing dig. So we're in the sets. It's a
Police
crime
are
scene
going to say
again, yeah?
it's going to be a couple of weeks
Right.
excavating. They've got archaeologists there now. What a
Bloody
terrible, terrible, terrible tale.
What a hideous.
So this
man.
was the cafe where she'd worked.
What a hideous man.
I mean, beyond. You know, that poor nanny that they had. I didn't realise that she was pregnant because, you know, he stabbed her, the nanny that looked after and it was pregnant with his.
Oh God.
But Rose West
I
as
do-
well.
I just can't.
They say her evil was like, and who is it she's having an affair with? Something unholy in the prison.
But I do
now.
get frustrated. There's
She's
always-
with some
there
other
is often
horrible-
this thing, it's
Oh,
like-
I know who she was rumoured to be having an affair with in prison.
It's like-
Who is that dreadful woman that hid her child under the bed?
No, yeah. But there is this, I mean, I'm not suggesting, there's no hierarchy of evil here, because they were both fucking evil. But there is that weird thing, isn't there, where it's like there's more horror for the woman, in a sense, than there is for the man. I suppose that must be born of the fact that we assume that there is a more nurturing maternal element to a
Well,
woman.
you know, what was very powerful for Fred when he was picking up
It's
these
like the
girls
balls
was
smoke,
that Rose
Myron
would
Hindley,
be
yeah,
in the
Nicola.
car as well. And Rose would be, you know, and
Yeah.
Rose was absolutely vicious. I mean, I've seen interviews with her children and, oh, those poor children, what they went through. They were absolutely terrified of her.
Awful. So that is ongoing, and the final story that's I just wanted to pay tribute to this poor boy.
No, it's been
A
bad news day today,
9-year-old
really
boy in
has.
Blackpool who was playing football and was struck by lightning. And it's just a tragically sad fact. I think we often joke and laugh and talk about this as always a sort of thing.
You never really think of it actually happening to
No,
people.
exactly. And I think we have in the past. We've talked about it in a sort of light-hearted fashion, like don't pop your umbrella and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's just another one of those
forget
moments where
just
you,
how dangerous it is.
you pause. Now, I can't work out if, you know, he was in the middle of a field and he was
Yeah,
perhaps
the
near a
football grounds
goalpost
have
or
said
something.
that have made a statement, put out a statement today saying it wasn't in an official playing
Right.
session. I think he was just knocking
Right.
about. I
Knocking
think.
about, okay.
But I mean, he was alive when they took him to hospital, but sadly, he just lost his fight in a hospital. So
So on average in the UK, 2 people are killed by lightning every year.
Really?
Yeah. There were about 6,000 lightning strikes. And I've talked before, years and years ago, for Nat Geo, I did a film about lightning strike survivors, and we did lightning strike research. We climbed a mountain in the Rockies in Colorado where they had this guy, mad scientist, had constructed about 85 lightning rods, and we went up there, and when the lightning struck, you would see it fly around all these lightning rods. And anyway, that's where we filmed a field of dead moose or elk or whatever they were, had all been struck by lightning, and it spread around. But we met a woman who'd been struck by lightning 6 times, or even more than that, I think. But she was struck every time she was on the phone, and the lightning would come down. You know,
my
so
parents used to know this actor. Christopher Fulton, and he came out of his flat, and the lightning hit a paving stone. I
Oh
don't know.
my
There must have,
God.
and it broke, and it smashed into his face. His face was really smashed up from it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's a real
So
thing.
what is the
So
advice when lightning is striking?
don't go out.
At all?
Don't go out. But also, if you're in a car, I don't know if the advice on this has changed, but in the old days, with old sort of, not pre-digital, don't touch your radio. Don't have your radio on in a car, and don't touch your radio. We had a couple of people who've been
Really?
struck touching the radio, because of course it hits the aerial on the car, and it goes into your car. So flick the aerial off. Don't get on a phone. Possibly don't call anyone on a landline. This woman was struck on a landline.
Really?
Yeah.
Shelley just said there that her friend lost all her horses because lightning struck and it went through their hooves.
Well, this is what happened. This is what happened to the elk or the moose that we filmed with. He took us over this. He said,
But
"Look
what
at
if
this."
you're out and you're out in the woods and raining and you don't go under a tree? That's bad.
Well, if you've got rubber shoes, well, I mean, I remember.
Can you get hit by lightning if you've got rubber shoes on?
Yes, you can get struck, but I mean, I remember trying. I kept saying to this guy, if I lay flat on the floor, is that better? And he was like, well, yes, it is, because you're not perpendicular, you're not up. But he said, if you lay, it was always a caveat. If you lay flat on the floor and you're in an open field and you're on high land, and it does strike you, you'll probably be killed instantly because it would go across your whole body against the floor because it would earth itself.
I remember once, did I interview these?
Oh, look, Susie Othman. My dad used to pull out the aerials. Yeah, I mean, it's the thing. A lot of people get struck in their car. Ball lightning, we had footage of it. This was way back, and that from another Nat Geo film. Ball lightning is when lightning hits a plane, and for the passengers sat in the plane, you look up the aisle, it rolls down the aisle towards you. It passes through you. Yeah.
Tash Payne says, I was reading last night, you should get into a ball shape with your hands over your head.
There you go.
I remember, I think I interviewed these two people, or were they in a show that I did? There were two young kids that went under a tree because it was raining and lightning.
I told you this.
And they were sharing the...
I haven't.
Yeah, they were sharing their earpods. And it went through the earpods. No, they were saved.
Oh, they were safe. Well, I think I've told the tragic story of two women who were found in Hyde Park, and I think one of them had died, and she was struck because she had a underwired bra, and it had given her a heart attack straight away. Anyway, so it's rare, but it's possible. So be careful. Be careful in lightning storms. Is the advice there? And our heart goes out to that family. So.
Do you know what? Just that was quite an emotional live.
It was, yeah.
You know, lots and lots of love to everybody. Yeah. There's so much going on, but remember, there are more good people in the world than bad.
Yeah.
And remember, this is incredibly uncommon. And to the people of Palestine
and Israel
that are caught, the good people, the innocent people, the people that just want to live their lives, our hearts go out to you. We're going to think of some way to do some sort of fundraiser. And to those in power who it suits to keep
this conflict going
and keep this conflict going, shame on you. And I hope there is a hell for all of you.
Guys, have a
Love
safe
you.
day.
Subscribe to the channel.
Bye.